You've heard the heads of Border Patrol and ICE speak about the legal challenges surrounding undocumented crossings. Here now are two people familiar with the federal immigration system. They joined us in the Arizona 360 studio. Perla Trevizo is a border and immigration reporter for the Arizona Daily Star, and Shefali Milczarek-Desai is a professor in the James E. Rogers College of Law. For being here, let's begin with the latest news. President Trump saying that it's possible that people could not get asylum even after requesting it. Shefali, I want to start with you. Is that actually within the legal capacity of the president?
Well, so that's the law. The law says that whether you arrive at a port of entry or not, it's irrelevant. You should be able to claim asylum. Now, what the administration is pointing to is a different portion of that statute, which states that when the president finds that entry of people might be detrimental to the interests of the United States, then the president can do what's necessary to curtail that entry, to suspend it, or to put restrictions on it. But here's the thing, there's the other statute that clearly states people can apply for asylum whether they come to a port of entry or not. So in order for the president to do what he's done legally, and there's already a lawsuit pending on this, he would have to be able to say that he can rewrite this law of Congress unilaterally.
Any indication that people are treated differently whether they come to the port of entry, request asylum, or if they're arrested between ports of entry?
Not to this moment. So you have some people who start at the port of entry, but maybe the wait time is too long. They keep telling to keep coming back, and then they go in between the ports. Ultimately, here, especially here in Arizona, most of those families are released with a notice to appear with an immigration officer at a later point.
Can people work during that time frame? Can children go to school and live their lives, so to speak, prior to meeting with a judge?
I mean, children can go to school as long as they have a residence in the U.S., right? Schools are not supposed to ask about immigration status. In terms of work permit, I do think that once you start in the court process, if it takes longer than 6 months, is that correct? Or
it's 150 days.
You can request a work permit, which is something the administration has also continued to bring up, as saying that it's that families are taking advantage of this because then they can get a work permit while they go through the slow system, which now has more than 1 million cases pending.
How do we fix this backlog? Are there more judges being hired?
I don't think they're being hired as much as they need to be. And one of the important factors, and I've talked about this already, is legal representation, legal orientation programs in the courts. So it's increasing judges, it's increasing lawyers, because and here's something that has been studied before. When you provide people with access to justice, when you give them the sense that their claims are being heard and that they're receiving a fair due process and that procedures and laws are being followed, they are far more likely to accept the outcome when it comes, whether or not that outcome is positive or negative for them. And that's something we haven't focused on in our system.
So is there a disconnect, though? Is the fear of persecution and safety, security an issue in Central America, or is this a result of misinformation and messaging in those countries?
I think both. I think there's the administration, both this one and the previous one, has tried to go to Central American countries and advertise and say, if you come, you're not going to be allowed to stay, talking about the dangers of crossing. But you also have the misinformation from the smugglers and the guides who tell them, you know, you can come and you can present yourself at a port of entry. You do have the people who are just fleeing for their lives, and it doesn't matter what the government or the smugglers are saying, they see no choice but to come to the United States to seek refuge.
Shefali, is that a fair assessment? I mean, I think it's fair to say that life in Central American countries has always been challenged, but suddenly there's this influx. Is something happening there right now, or is this a result of the messaging?
I think that the situation is growing worse, and I think that there probably are higher incidents of persecution. And I wanted to mention that one of the reasons that the administration is putting forth for this new proclamation is that many asylum claims they're saying they lack merit. And what I want to say is, yes, there is a very high rate of denials of asylum claims, but that doesn't mean that they lack merit. What it means is that people often don't know what it requires to put forth an asylum claim. Again, they don't have legal representation, and we know that asylum seekers in particular are 5 times more likely to prevail on their claims if they're represented.
Okay. All right. My thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.